In the crowded cafeteria of Westridge Elementary School, where invisible social boundaries divided students more effectively than any wall ever could, a group of designer-clothed children surrounded 7-year-old Noah Jenkins, laughing cruelly as they knocked his free lunch tray to the floor, splattering the only meal he would have that day across his worn-out shoes. "Look at the charity case crying over spilled milk," taunted Blake Thompson, the wealthiest student in school, as he high-fived his friends while Noah knelt trembling, trying to salvage what he could, his oversized second-hand clothes revealing bony wrists and the fading bruise his alcoholic father had left the night before. If stories of injustice and the remarkable moments when karma finally arrives move you, please subscribe to our channel now to witness more powerful tales of redemption and justice that remind us how quickly fortunes can change when truth comes to light. What none of the bullies realized was that Principal Marquez had been standing in the doorway, witnessing the entire incident, her normally kind eyes hardening with a resolve that would shake the very foundation of the school's socials hierarchy. Noah Jenkins kept his head down, as he always did, gathering what he could of his spilled lunch from the cafeteria floor, trying to ignore the laughter surrounding him. At 7 years old, he had already mastered the art of invisibility, or so he thought until today. The free lunch program meant he got one guaranteed meal each day, making the loss of this one particularly painful. His small hands worked quickly, picking up the apple that had rolled away and the sealed milk carton that had miraculously remained intact. "What a loser," sneered Kylie Morgan, flipping her perfectly braided hair adorned with expensive clips that probably cost more than all of Noah's clothes combined. "My dad says people on welfare are just lazy." Noah didn't respond. Speaking back only made things worse. He'd learned that lesson months ago, when he first transferred to Westridge Elementary after his mother died. This school in the affluent part of town was nothing like his previous one, but it was the only option after they'd had to move to the small apartment on the district's edge. "Stia's Principal Marquez." One of the lunch monitors finally noticed the commotion, hurrying over with a rag. "I didn't see what happened." "I did," Principal Elena Marquez said, her voice cutting through the cafeteria chatter like a knife. The group of children surrounding Noah immediately dispersed, their smug expressions faltering under her steady gaze. Blake Thompson, Madison Phillips, Kylie Morgan, and Jason West to my office immediately after lunch. Blake, the ringleader, a third grader with expensive sneakers and a designer backpack, opened his mouth to protest, but something in Principal Marquez's expression made him reconsider. She knelt beside Noah, helping him collect the remains of his lunch. "Mrs. Garcia," she called to the cafeteria manager, "please provide Noah with a fresh lunch." She turned to Noah, her voice gentler. "Come with me for a minute, Noah." He followed her out of the cafeteria, aware of the stares burning into his back. Principal Marquez led him to the nurse's office rather than her own. "Mrs. Bennett, could you check Noah over, please? I noticed a bruise on his wrist." Noah instinctively pulled his sleeve down, panic rising in his chest. "I fell," he said automatically, the excuse well rehearsed, "on the stairs at home." Principal Marquez exchanged a look with the nurse that Noah couldn't interpret, but didn't press the issue. "Mrs. Bennett will get you a fresh lunch, Noah. You can eat here today in peace." When she left, Noah exhaled relief mixing with a new anxiety. No one had noticed the bruises before, or at least no one had said anything. His father would be furious if the school started asking questions. Noah returned to the small apartment he shared with his father that afternoon, dreading what he would find. On good days, David Jenkins would be asleep on the couch, empty bottles on the floor, but otherwise, harmless. On bad days, the smallest thing could trigger his rage. A noise, a question, a reminder of bills they couldn't pay, or worse, any mention of Noah's mother Sarah, who had died 8 months ago after a lengthy battle with cancer. Today, Noah found his Father conscious but quiet, staring at the television, though his eyes didn't seem to register the images flickering across the screen. "Dad? I'm home." David Jenkins looked up, his bloodshot eyes focusing with effort. "How was school?" "Oh, fine," Noah answered automatically, setting his backpack on the kitchen table, a wobbly yard sale find that served as both dining area and Noah's homework station. The apartment was a single bedroom, with Noah sleeping on a pull-out couch in the living room. It was nothing like their old house with its small garden where his mother had grown tomatoes and zucchini. Everything from that life was gone now, sold to pay medical bills, or lost when they could no longer afford the rent. Noah opened the refrigerator, finding it nearly empty except for a few condiments, some milk approaching its expiration date, and half a loaf of bread. Dinner would be toast again, unless his father had cashed his unemployment check and bought groceries, which seemed unlikely given the empty bottles by the couch. With practiced efficiency, Noah began picking up the apartment, gathering empty bottles into a trash bag, wiping surfaces with a damp cloth, and collecting dirty laundry into a pile that he would take to the laundromat on Saturday, using the quarters he'd saved from returning bottles for deposit. Despite everything, Noah maintained a small corner of hope in his heart. His school books were carefully arranged in his backpack, homework always completed, despite having no desk, no computer, and often no supervision. His mother had valued education above all else, telling him repeatedly that knowledge was the one thing no one could ever take away from him. "They called from the factory again," his father said suddenly. "No opening still." Noah nodded, unsure what response was expected. His father had worked at the manufacturing plant for 15 years before the layoffs, 6 months before his mother's diagnosis. The timing couldn't have been worse, the loss of income and health insurance coming just when they needed it most. "I'll find something," David muttered, more to himself than to Noah. "Something will turn up." Noah prepared 2 slices of toast with peanut butter, bringing one to his father, who took it with a hand that trembled slightly. They ate in silence, the television providing background noise to fill the emptiness of their lives. That night, as Noah tried to sleep on the lumpy pull-out couch, he thought about what had happened at school. Principal Marquez had seen everything, not just the bullying, but the bruise too. No adult had ever really seen him before, seen past the carefully constructed facade of normalcy he tried to maintain. It terrified him, and yet somewhere deep inside, a tiny part of him felt relieved. Someone had noticed. Someone had cared enough to look twice. In the darkness, he allowed himself a moment of weakness, tears sliding silently down his cheeks. He missed his mother with an ache that never diminished her gentle hands, her patient smile, her unwavering belief that things would get better. She had been wrong about that in the end. Things had only gotten worse. Noah wiped his eyes with determination. Tomorrow would be another day of keeping his head down, avoiding Blake and his friends, and surviving. He was good at surviving. It was the one skill life had made sure he mastered. As he drifted to sleep, he wondered what would happen in Principal Marquez's office tomorrow, whether anything would really change, or if the wealthy parents would ensure their children faced no real consequences as they always had before. Blake Thompson sat in the leather passenger seat of his mother's Range Rover, drumming his fingers against the expensive upholstery, his mind replaying the cafeteria incident with growing unease. Principal Marquez had never intervened before when he and his friends had their fun with the poor kids. Something felt different this time. "How was school, sweetie?" Charlotte Thompson asked, expertly navigating the luxury vehicle through the manicured streets of Oakwood Estates where the Thompsons' sprawling 5-bedroom home awaited. "Fine," Blake replied automatically, the standard answer that required no elaboration. Charlotte glanced at her son, recognizing the tension in his posture. "Anything interesting happened today?" Blake considered telling her about being called to the EMR principal's office, but quickly dismissed the idea. His mother might understand or even sympathize, but if his father found out, there would be consequences. Richard Thompson did not tolerate what he called administrative interference in his son's life. "Nothing really," Blake said instead, staring out the window at the perfect lawns and imposing homes that made up his neighborhood. The Thompson residence stood at the end of a circular drive, an architectural showcase featuring floor-to-ceiling windows, multiple balconies, and a 3-car garage housing Richard's Tesla Charlotte's Range Rover and the weekend car, a vintage Porsche that gleamed under spotless lighting. Inside, Brazilian hardwood floors, Italian marble countertops, and custom furniture created an atmosphere of effortless luxury. Blake dropped his designer backpack in the entryway, knowing the housekeeper would place it in his study area later. "I'm going to the game room," he announced, heading toward his private sanctuary. Equipped with the latest gaming systems, a miniature basketball court, and a snack bar perpetually stocked with his favorite treats. As he settled into his gaming chair, Blake's phone buzzed with messages from his friends, all nervous about tomorrow's meeting with Principal Marquez. "My dad will totally get us out of this," Jason had written. "He plays golf with the superintendent. What if she tells our parents what we did?" Madison's message betrayed more concern. Blake didn't respond immediately. His father's influence at Westridge Elementary was legendary. As the school's largest donor, Richard Thompson had funded the new science wing, the athletic field upgrades, and the annual teacher appreciation events. Though Thompson's name appeared on plaques throughout the building, a constant reminder of who really held power at Westridge. "Don't worry," he finally typed. "Nothing will happen to us." Yet, despite his confident message, Blake felt an unfamiliar sensation gnawing at his stomach. Principal Marquez had looked different today, her eyes harder than he'd ever seen them when she watched him in the cafeteria. Worse, she had seen the bruise on Noah's wrist had connected with the shabby boy in a way that suggested she wouldn't let this incident slide like all the others. Blake had never considered the consequences of his actions before. Why would he? His entire life had been a lesson in getting whatever he wanted whenever he wanted it. His father had taught him through words and example that Thompsons were winners, that money solved all problems, and that people without money simply hadn't tried hard enough. "People like that Jenkins boy are lazy," Richard had explained once, when they'd driven past the rundown apartment complex where Noah lived. If his parents wanted better, they should have worked harder. That's the beauty of America. Son, anyone can succeed if they just apply themselves. Blake had accepted this as gospel, never questioning the fairness of a 7-year-old living in a crumbling apartment with barely enough food, while Blake himself had every advantage imaginable. "Blake, dinner in 30 minutes, Charlotte called, interrupting his thoughts. Dinner at the Thompson house was a formal affair, even on weeknight. Charlotte insisted the family eat together at the massive dining table, though Richard was often absent due to business commitments or social obligations that took precedence over family meals. Tonight, however, Richard arrived home in time, joining Blake and Charlotte in the dining room where the housekeeper had set out the meal, prepared by their part-time chef. "How's my future CEO doing?" Richard asked, ruffling Blake's hair before taking his seat at the head of the table. "Fine, Dad." "Just fine? Thompsons don't do fine, son. We do exceptional." Richard adjusted his cuffs, revealing a watch that cost more than most people's cars. "Any tests today? Score the winning goal in PE? Put any of those scholarship kids in their place?" Blake hesitated just long enough for his father to notice. "What is it?" Richard's voice sharpened. "A businessman detecting a problem. I have to go to Principal Marquez's office tomorrow," Blake admitted, knowing his father would find out eventually. "It's nothing, just a misunderstanding." Richard set down his fork. "What kind of misunderstanding?" "Some poor kid dropped his lunch." "Trey, she thinks I did it on purpose. Did you?" Blake looked his father in the eye, reading the unspoken message there. Thompsons didn't admit weakness or fault. "No, sir, it was an accident," Richard nodded, satisfied with the answer regardless of its truthfulness. "I'll call Marquez in the morning. Remind her who funds her school. This will be cleared up before first." Belle, Charlotte, looked uncomfortable but said nothing, taking a small sip of her wine instead. Blake felt a momentary relief, followed by an unexpected twinge of something that might have been guilt. The image of Noah kneeling on the floor trying to salvage his spilled lunch flashed through his mind. "Actually, Dad," Blake began, then stopped himself. What was he thinking? His father would handle it as he always did, and life would continue as normal. Across town, Kylie Morgan, Madison Phillips, and Jason West were having similar conversations with their parents, all wealthy, influential members of Westridge Elementary's exclusive parent circle. All promised intervention assurances that their precious children would face no consequences for what was being dismissed as harmless childhood antics. None of these families had ever encountered a principal like Elena Marquez before. None of them realized that the power dynamic they had taken for granted was about to shift dramatically. As Blake finished his perfectly prepared dinner, served on fine china, he had no way of knowing that tomorrow would mark the beginning of a transformation that would challenge everything he had been taught about his place in the world and the value of those he had been raised to dismiss. Principal Elena Marquez arrived at Westridge Elementary at 6:30 the following morning, a full hour before most of her staff. The early quiet allowed her to prepare for what she knew would be a challenging day. At 42, she had been principal for just under 2 years, following 15 years as a teacher in the district's less affluent schools. Her appointment had raised eyebrows among Westridge's wealthy parent community, many questioning whether someone from her background could understand the unique needs of their privileged children. Elena had recognized the underlying message. She wasn't one of them. The daughter of Mexican immigrants, she had worked her way through college and graduate school, often holding 2 jobs while studying. Her understanding of education came from both sides of the socioeconomic divide, giving her a perspective many of her predecessors had lacked. As expected, the phone calls began at 7:15. First Richard Thompson, then Jason West's mother, followed by Madison's father and Kylie's parents. All delivered variations of the same message. Their children were good kids who meant no harm. Surely this was being blown out of proportion. Perhaps Noah was oversensitive, or even seeking attention. Elena listened politely to each, allowing them to finish before delivering the same calm response. "I witnessed the incident personally. It was deliberate bullying, and it violated our school's code of conduct. I look forward to discussing this with you after I've met with the children." Richard Thompson had been the most aggressive. "Principal Marquez, let me remind you that the Thompson family has been extremely generous to Westridge. The science wing wouldn't exist without our donations, and we're grateful for your support, Mr. Thompson," Elena had replied, her voice pleasant but firm. "I'm sure you understand that our policies must apply equally to all students, regardless of their family's contributions." She had ended each call politely but decisively, establishing from the outset that she would not be intimidated. Now, as she reviewed Noah Jenkins's file, her resolve only strengthened. The boy had transferred to Westridge 8 months ago, following his mother's death from cancer. His previous school records showed strong academic performance, despite frequent absences during his mother's illness. His current teachers noted his intelligence and work ethic, but also his isolation and reluctance to participate in class discussions or group activities, what the file didn't contain. But what Elena strongly suspected was that Noah's home situation had deteriorated significantly. The bruise she had spotted yesterday wasn't the first sign that had caught her attention. There were the oversized clothes, the constant hunger, the exhaustion that sometimes caused him to nearly fall asleep in class. Classic signs she had seen too many times as a teacher. At precisely 9 o'clock, Blake Thompson, Kylie Morgan, Madison Phillips, and Jason West filed into her office, their expressions ranging from nervous to defiant. She had arranged 5 chairs her own behind the desk, and 4 facing her. "Thank you for coming," she began, as if they had a choice. "I want to discuss what happened in the cafeteria yesterday." "It was an accident," Blake said, immediately clearly having rehearsed this line. "I bumped into Noah. I didn't mean to knock over his tray." Elena studied him for a moment. "Blake, I was standing in the doorway for nearly 5 minutes before the incident. I saw you and your friends surrounding Noah. I heard what was said. It was not an accident." The children exchanged uneasy glances, their prepared story crumbling under her direct approach. "Bullying is unacceptable at Westridge," Elena continued. "It doesn't matter who you are, who your parents are, or how much money your families donate to this school. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect." We're just joking around," Kylie offered her designer shoes, tapping nervously against the carpet. "Noah's so sensitive." "Losing the only meal you might get that day isn't a joke, Kylie," Elena replied, watching comprehension slowly dawn on their faces. "Noah is on our free lunch program. For some students, that meal is extremely important." Madison looked genuinely confused. "Can't his parents just make him another lunch?" Elena recognized an opportunity for education, rather than simply punishment. Not all families at Westridge have the same resources. Noah's mother died recently, and his father is struggling. The lunch you saw thrown on the floor yesterday might have been the only full meal Noah would get. She let that sink in before continuing. "Here's what's going to happen. Each of you will receive 1 week of lunch detention, during which you'll help the cafeteria staff serve food to other students. You'll each write a letter of apology to Noah, and you'll meet with our school counselor to discuss empathy and how we treat others." "My dad says," Blake began. "I've already spoken with all of your parents," Elena interrupted gently. "And while they may not agree with my decision, it stands. At Westridge, we're not just teaching academics, we're helping you become good people. Part of that is learning that actions have consequences." After dismissing the 4 students, Elena called Noah to her office. He entered cautiously, his thin shoulders hunched as if expecting a blow, his eyes darting around the room. "Am I in trouble?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Not at all, Noah." Elena smiled, gesturing to a chair. "I wanted to check how you're doing after yesterday and talk about some resources we have that might help you and your dad." She proceeded carefully, explaining the school's backpack program that sent food home with students on weekends, the clothing closet where donated items were available for any student who needed them, and the counseling services that could help him process his grief over his mother. Noah listened, his eyes downcast. "My dad wouldn't like charity," he finally said. "It's not charity, Noah, it's community," Elena corrected gently. "Sometimes people need help. Other times, they're in a position to give help. That's how communities work." As their conversation continued, Elena made a decision. She would visit Noah's home, talk to his father directly. The bruise she had seen concerned her deeply, but she wanted to offer support before involving Child Protective Services if possible. Her years in education had taught her that most parents, even struggling ones, wanted the best for their children. Sometimes they just needed resources and support, rather than punishment and separation. After Noah left, Elena's phone rang again. It was Richard Thompson demanding a meeting that afternoon. She agreed, setting a time, knowing this confrontation was inevitable. The school board chair had already called, warning her about donor relations and practical considerations. Elena remained unmoved. In her 2 years as principal, she had worked to build a more inclusive environment at Westridge, but had compromised too often in the face of pressure from wealthy parents. The sight of Noah kneeling on that cafeteria floor had crystallized something. For her, no more compromises, not when a child's welfare was at stake. As she prepared for her afternoon meetings, Elena thought about the contrasting worlds represented within Westridge's walls. Blake Thompson with every advantage, Noah Jenkins with almost none. Her job somehow was to create a space where both could learn and grow into their best selves. It wouldn't be easy, especially with parents like Richard Thompson fighting her at every turn, but it was necessary, and long overdue. Richard Thompson straightened his Italian silk tie as he strode through Westridge Elementary's main entrance, his presence immediately commanding attention from the front office staff. At 45, he had built Thompson Development into one of the region's most successful real estate companies through aggressive negotiation tactics and an unwavering belief in his own superiority. He did not lose negotiations, and he considered this meeting with Principal Marquez nothing more than a negotiation. Mr. Thompson, the receptionist, greeted him. "Principal Marquez is expecting you." Richard nodded curtly, not bothering with pleasantries. Behind him, Charlotte Thompson followed her expression, betraying her discomfort with the situation. Unlike her husband, she had questioned Blake that morning and suspected their son wasn't telling the complete truth about the cafeteria incident. Principal Marquez stood as they entered her office, extending her hand professionally. "Thank you for coming, Mr. and Mrs. Thompson. Please have a seat." Richard remained standing. "Let's cut to the chase, Principal Marquez. My son made a mistake. Boys will be boys. I don't see why this requires detention or any formal punishment." Elena gestured again to the chairs. "I understand your perspective, Mr. Thompson, but I'd appreciate if we could discuss this sitting down. There's quite a bit to cover." Reluctantly, Richard took a seat, his body language conveying his impatience. Charlotte sat beside him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Blake didn't just make a mistake," Elena began. "He participated in deliberate bullying behavior that has been ongoing according to staff reports and other students. Yesterday happened to be the first time I witnessed it personally. Kids tease each other." Richard dismissed with a wave of his hand. "It builds character. There's a significant difference between teasing and targeting a vulnerable student because of his socioeconomic status," Elena replied, her voice remaining calm. "What I witnessed yesterday crossed that line substantially." Charlotte spoke for the first time. "What exactly did Blake do? He told us he accidentally bumped into the other boy." Elena appreciated Charlotte's more measured approach. "I observed Blake and his friends surrounding Noah Jenkins. They deliberately knocked his lunch tray from his hands. Blake then mocked Noah, calling him a charity case, while Noah tried to salvage what food he could from the floor." Charlotte's expression fell. That's terrible." "Boys get rowdy," Richard insisted, though with slightly less conviction. "The Jenkins boy needs to toughen up if he's going to attend a school like Westridge." Elena leaned forward. "Mr. Thompson, Noah Jenkins is a 7-year-old child whose mother died from cancer less than a year ago. His father is struggling with unemployment and grief. Noah qualifies for our free lunch program, meaning that meal your son knocked to the floor was possibly the only complete meal he would have yesterday." Charlotte gasped softly. "I had no idea. Perhaps if the boy's father got a job instead of looking for handouts," Richard began. "Richard!" Charlotte interrupted sharply, surprising both her husband and Principal Marquez. "That's enough." Elena seized the opening. "Noah is one of our brightest students despite his circumstances. His teachers report he never misses an assignment, though he has no computer at home and completes all his work by hand. He's reading 2 grade levels above his age. He has tremendous potential." Charlotte nodded, absorbing this information, while Richard shifted uncomfortably. "Be that as it may," Richard said, reasserting himself. "I think a week of detention is excessive for what amounts to cafeteria roughhousing. The Thompson family has contributed over $500,000 to Westridge Elementary in the past 5 years. Surely that counts for something." Elena had anticipated this argument. "Your generosity to our school is greatly appreciated, Mr. Thompson. However, our code of conduct applies equally to all students. If anything, I would hope the children of our most generous donors would set an example for others." "Are you suggesting my son isn't well behaved?" Richard's voice took on a dangerous edge. "I'm suggesting that Blake has developed some concerning behaviors that need correction," Elena replied steadily. "Behaviors I suspect you're unaware of. This isn't an isolated incident." She opened a folder on her desk. "In the past 3 months, teachers have reported Blake making derogatory comments about students' clothing, taking lunch items from students who couldn't afford to purchase extras, and organizing exclusionary games at recess, where only children with certain expensive possessions could participate." Charlotte looked stricken. "We had no idea." "Because no one had the courage to address it before," Elena acknowledged. "And that's my responsibility. I should have intervened sooner." Richard's expression hardened. "I don't appreciate my son being made an example of. If you persist with this punishment, I'll be forced to reconsider our family's financial support of Westridge." The threat hung in the air exactly as he intended. In previous years, it would have worked immediately. Elena closed the folder. "Mr. Thompson Westridge Elementary appreciates your family's contributions, but we cannot allow donations to influence disciplinary decisions. Blake will serve his detention and participate in the restorative justice program I have outlined." Richard stood abruptly. "I'll be speaking with Superintendent Davis and the school board about this. I don't think you understand how things work here, Principal Marquez." "Richard, please," Charlotte interjected. "Maybe we should listen now or the hija car, Charlotte. Now." Richard cut her off before turning back to Elena. "This isn't over." After the door closed behind him, Charlotte lingered for a moment. "I apologize for my husband's behavior. He's protective of Blake," Elena nodded. "I understand, but I'm concerned about the path Blake is on, Mrs. Thompson. He's learning that money can insulate him from consequences, that some people matter less than others because of their financial circumstances. Those aren't lessons that will serve him well in life, regardless of his family's wealth." Charlotte was quiet for a moment, seeming to truly consider these words. "What was the boy's name?" "Again, the one Blake bullied?" "Noah Jenkins." Charlotte nodded, writing something in her designer planner. "Thank you, Principal Marquez, for your honesty, if nothing else." After Charlotte left, Elena released a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The confrontation had gone almost exactly as expected, with Richard threatening the school's funding. What she hadn't anticipated was Charlotte's reaction, the subtle break from her husband's position. It wasn't much, but it was something, perhaps a small crack in the unified front of privilege that had always protected children like Blake from facing real consequences. Her phone rang, the superintendent wanting an update on the Thompson situation. Elena straightened her shoulders. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time, she felt certain she was on the right side of it. Noah's face, when she'd explained the resources available to him, had confirmed what she already knew. Every child deserved an advocate, especially those who had no one else to speak for them. Elena Marquez intended to be that advocate, no matter the cost to her career. Elena Marquez parked her modest sedan outside the Greenview Apartments at precisely 6:30 that evening. The complex stood in stark contrast to the manicured estates where most Westridge students lived, its aging facade and cracked concrete, walkways telling the story of systematic neglect. She had called ahead, informing David Jenkins of her visit, though his response had been guarded at best. Gathering her bag containing information about community resources, Elena made her way to Apartment 14B on the second floor. Peeling paint and a broken security door marked the entrance to the building. The elevator displayed an out-of-order sign that looked permanent, forcing Elena to climb the graffiti-marked stairwell. She knocked gently on 14B hearing movement. Inside, before the door opened, revealing Noah's father. David Jenkins appeared older than his 35 years, his face gaunt with fatigue and grief. His clothes clean but well-worn. Elena noted his bloodshot eyes, the slight tremor in his hands, signs she recognized from her years working with parents in crisis. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm Principal Marquez from Westridge. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me." He nodded, stepping back to allow her entry. "Come in. Sorry about the mess. I wasn't expecting company." The apartment was small, but Elena noticed it was meticulously organized despite the limited furniture and obvious poverty. Books were stacked neatly on a makeshift shelf, homework papers arranged on the kitchen table. Someone, Noah most likely, was trying desperately to maintain order amid chaos. "Noah's asleep," David explained, gesturing to the couch that had been converted into a bed in the living room. "He goes down early most nights." Elena noted there was only one bedroom visible, confirming her suspicion that Noah slept in the main living area. "I appreciate you making time to talk, Mr. Jenkins. I wanted to discuss some resources that might help your family and check in after an incident at school yesterday." David's expression tightened. "Noah mentioned something about his lunch. Said he dropped it." "Noah didn't drop his lunch, Mr. Jenkins. It was knocked from his hands by another student, deliberately." Elena kept her voice gentle, but firm. Noah was targeted because of his economic circumstances. David sank into a kitchen chair, his shoulders slumping. "Those rich kids. It was the same at his last school before we had to move here. Sarah, my wife, she always knew how to handle it." "I don't." Elena sat across from him. "Noah is an exceptional student. His teachers are impressed with his intelligence and work ethic. But I'm concerned about some things I've observed, including a bruise on his wrist yesterday." David's head snapped up, fear and shame crossing his features. I didn't." He stopped, taking a deep breath. "I grabbed him too. Hard. I was drunk. I'm not proud of it." The admission surprised Elena, who had expected denials. "Mr. Jenkins, I need to be clear that if I believe Noah is in danger, I'm legally required to report it to Child Protective Services." "They'll take him away," David whispered, the terror in his voice unmistakable. "Not necessarily. My goal is to help your family stay together, but safely." Elena leaned forward. "Noah has already lost his mother. He shouldn't lose his father, too." David covered his face with his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were wet. "I don't know how to do this without her. Sarah was the strong one. After she got sick, everything fell apart. I lost my job, couldn't pay the medical bills, couldn't keep our house. Now I can barely keep food on the table. Are you getting any support? Grief counseling, unemployment benefits?" He shook his head. "The unemployment ran out. I've applied everywhere, but nothing comes through. As for counseling," he gestured vaguely at the apartment. "How would I pay for that?" Elena opened her bag, pulling out the folder she had prepared. "There are community resources available, Mr. Jenkins. Free counseling services at the community center, job placement programs specifically for single parents. The school has a weekend backpack program that sends food home with students. None of this is charity. It's support meant to help families through difficult transitions." David eyed the folder warily. "Noah said something similar. Said you told him it was community, not charity." Elena smiled. "He was listening. Smart boy." "He's all I have left of Sarah," David said, his voice breaking. "Her eyes, her smile, even the way he reads everything he can get his hands on, just like she did. I can't lose him, but I'm scared I'm failing him every day." "The drinking?" Elena asked directly. David nodded, shamefaced. "It started after the diagnosis. Got worse after she died. I tell myself it's temporary just to get through the night, but then morning comes and nothing's better." Elena took a calculated risk. "There's an AA meeting at the community center 3 blocks from here. They offer childcare during sessions. I could pick Noah up from school those evenings, make sure he gets dinner through our after-school program." "Why would you do that? Go out of your way for us." "Because every child deserves a chance, Mr. Jenkins. Noah has incredible potential, but he needs stability, support, and safety to reach it." David stared at the folder, then at the pull-out couch where Noah slept. "I hit bottom yesterday," he admitted. "Found myself at the liquor store with our grocery money in my hand. Something stopped me. Maybe Sarah, I don't know. Came home and poured everything down the drain. Haven't had a drink since. It's only been 24 hours, but it's a start," Elena encouraged. "A good one. "I want to be the father Noah deserves," David said with newfound determination. "I want to be worthy of Sarah's son." Elena spent the next hour walking David through the resources available, helping him make an appointment with the employment center and explaining the school's support programs. As they talked, she observed subtle changes in his demeanor, the straightening of his shoulders, the return of purpose to his eyes. "About the bruise," he said as she prepared to leave, "it won't happen again, I swear it." Elena assessed his sincerity. "I believe you, Mr. Jenkins, but I'll be checking in regularly, and so will our school counselor." "Noah needs to know he's safe at home." David nodded. "I understand. And thank you for seeing us. Really seeing us." As Elena walked back to her car, she reflected on the two fathers she had met that day. Richard Thompson, with every advantage, using his wealth as a weapon to shield his son from consequences. David Jenkins, broken by grief and poverty, yet willing to acknowledge his failures and fight to overcome them for his son's sake. She wondered which father would ultimately give his son the tools needed for a good life. Wealth and privilege could provide many things, but they couldn't teach empathy, resilience, or the value of human connection. Those lessons came from somewhere deeper. Elena started her car, glancing up at apartment 14B, where a light still burned. There was hope there, she decided, for both Noah and his father. Her job now was to ensure that Westridge Elementary became a place where that hope could flourish, even for those who arrived with nothing but determination and the will to survive. The following Monday, Elena Marquez stood before the assembled staff of Westridge Elementary, outlining her new initiative. Dignity for All, she had named it, a comprehensive approach to addressing the socio-economic disparities that had long gone unacknowledged at the school. "For too long we've pretended these differences don't exist," she explained to the gathered teachers and staff. "We've allowed children from less privileged backgrounds to feel ashamed of their circumstances while inadvertently teaching our wealthy students that their privilege is invisible or worse deserved rather than fortunate." She detailed the program's three main components: an educational curriculum focused on empathy and community responsibility, a resource center providing essentials for students in need, and a zero-tolerance policy for bullying based on socioeconomic factors. The Dignity Closet will provide clothing, school supplies, hygiene items, and emergency food assistance, Elena continued, all available discreetly to any student who needs them. We're also implementing an anonymous lunch account donation system, where families can contribute to cover extra food items for students who can't afford them. Mrs. Baker, the third-grade teacher, raised her hand. "This is wonderful, Elena, but what about pushback from certain parents? We all know who I mean." Elena nodded, acknowledging the unspoken concern about Richard Thompson and other wealthy donors. "I've already received some resistance. That's to be expected. But I believe most of our families will support this initiative once they understand its purpose. We're not just helping struggling students, we're creating a more compassionate community for everyone." After the meeting, Ms. Wilson, the school counselor, stayed behind. "I want to update you on Noah Jenkins. He came to see me this morning, seemed a bit more open than before." "That's progress," Elena replied. "How did he seem otherwise?" "Better, actually. Mentioned his dad is looking for work, attended some kind of meeting over the weekend." Noah seemed cautiously hopeful. Elena smiled, feeling a small measure of satisfaction. Her visit to the Jenkins apartment had apparently yielded some positive results. "And what about Blake Thompson and the others? They started their cafeteria duty today." Ms. Wilson chuckled. "Blake looked like he'd been sentenced to hard labor when I saw him serving vegetables. But you know what was interesting? I overheard Madison Phillips explaining to a first grader why waste was a problem, because some kids really need this food. Maybe your message is getting through." Throughout the week, Elena oversaw the establishment of the Dignity Closet converting, a small unused office into a welcoming space filled with neatly organized donations. Charlotte Thompson had surprised everyone by being among the first to contribute, sending in bags of new clothing with tags still attached, school supplies, and backpacks. By Wednesday, word of Westridge's new initiative had spread through the parent community, generating mixed reactions. Some parents immediately embraced the program, sending in contributions and volunteering time. Others, particularly those in Richard Thompson's social circle, expressed concerns that the school was becoming too focused on social issues rather than academic excellence. Elena had anticipated this divide. On Thursday evening, she hosted a parent information session explaining the research showing that addressing basic needs and creating inclusive environments actually improved academic outcomes for all students, not just those in need. Operate. When children feel secure, respected, and included, they perform better academically, she explained to the gathered parents. This isn't about charity, it's about creating optimal conditions for learning. Most parents nodded in agreement. But Richard Thompson, conspicuously absent, had sent several allies to question the initiative. Shouldn't these support programs be handled by outside charities rather than the school? Asked James Foster, a hedge fund manager and close friend of Richard's. Research shows that integrating support within the school environment reduces stigma and improves utilization, Elena replied. When help is normalized, it becomes more effective. After the meeting, Charlotte Thompson approached Elena. Unlike the previous encounter with her husband, Charlotte came alone, her expression thoughtful. Hey, Principal Marquez, I wanted to let you know that I've organized a clothing drive among the country club members. We should have a substantial donation for your dignity closet by next week. Elena couldn't hide her surprise. That's extremely generous, Mrs. Thompson, thank you. Charlotte lowered her voice. I visited the Jenkins apartment yesterday, brought over some of Blake's outgrown clothes for Noah. I hope that was all right. Of course. How did it go? It was, educational. Charlotte seemed to choose her words carefully. Noah is such a bright, articulate child, and Mr. Jenkins, he's not what Richard described at all. He's just a father trying his best after unimaginable loss. Elena nodded, encouraging Charlotte to continue. I grew up poor, Principal Marquez, Charlotte confessed. Not many people know that. Richard doesn't like me to mention it. But seeing Noah reminded me of myself at that age. The difference is, I had a teacher who believed in me, who made sure I had what I needed to succeed. I want to be that person for someone else. That's exactly the community spirit we're trying to foster, Mrs. Thompson. Charlotte, please. She smiled briefly before her expression grew serious again. I should warn you, Richard is organizing opposition to your program. He's meeting with school board members, Superintendent Davis, even the mayor. He sees this as a personal affront somehow. I expected as much, Elena acknowledged. But I believe what we're doing is right for all our students, including Blake, Charlotte nodded. I'm beginning to see that too. Blake has been different since starting his cafeteria duty. Quieter, more reflective. Yesterday he asked me why some kids only get school lunch and nothing else. We had our first real conversation about privilege. It was uncomfortable but necessary, I think. As predicted, Richard Thompson escalated his opposition to the Dignity for All initiative. By Friday, Elena had received calls from 2 school board members and Superintendent Davis, all expressing concerns about the program's focus and implementation. None directly ordered her to stop, but the pressure was unmistakable. Nonetheless, the Dignity Closet opened on Friday afternoon. Elena had worried that stigma would prevent students from utilizing it. But Mrs. Wilson had cleverly involved student council members in promoting the resource, framing it as a community exchange where everyone was welcome to take what they needed and give what they could. Noah Jenkins was among the first visitors, quietly selecting a new backpack to replace his tattered one and several notebooks. Elena, watching discreetly from her office doorway, noticed Blake Thompson observing from down the hall, his expression unreadable but thoughtful. Small steps, Elena reminded herself. changing a culture of privilege and shame wouldn't happen overnight. But watching Noah walk away with his head slightly higher, his new backpack securely on his shoulders, she knew they were moving in the right direction. Blake Thompson hated cafeteria duty, hated the hairnet he was required to wear, hated the plastic gloves that made his hands sweat, hated standing behind the counter, serving food like a common worker. Most of all, he hated that his friends could see him this way, reduced and humiliated. "More corn?" he asked mechanically as the lunch line progressed. The kindergartner nodded, pushing her tray forward. Blake added a spoonful of corn, noticing the girl's free lunch card placed at the edge of her tray. Third day of his punishment, and he'd become attuned to spotting the small blue cards that identified students receiving free meals. Yesterday, he had observed with surprise how many students actually use them, not just the obviously poor. Kids like Noah Jenkins, but children he wouldn't have picked out as needy. Thompson serving corn. Never thought I'd see the day. Blake looked up to find Jason, one of his friends, grinning at him from the line. Jason had finished his cafeteria duty yesterday, maintaining throughout that the whole thing was stupid and unfair. 2 more days, Blake muttered, continuing to serve as the line moved forward. "My dad says your dad is going to get Marquez fired," Jason said loudly enough for nearby students to hear. "Said the school board is having an emergency meeting about it." Blake said nothing, focusing instead on portioning corn. His father had indeed been on a warpath at home, making endless phone calls and holding meetings with other parents in their living room. His mother had grown increasingly quiet during these sessions, sometimes leaving the room entirely, a behavior Blake had never witnessed before. When Noah Jenkins appeared in the lunch line, Blake felt a complicated mixture of emotions: anger, embarrassment, and something new he couldn't quite identify. Noah kept his eyes down, pushing his tray forward without looking up. "Corn?" Blake asked, his voice quieter than before. Noah nodded, still not making eye contact. Blake added the serving, noticing Noah's clean but obviously second-hand clothes, the too large shirt with frayed cuffs. Details he would have previously used as ammunition for mockery, now registered differently. As Noah moved along the line, Blake heard a commotion from the lunch table area. Jason and Kylie were mimicking Noah's hunched walk, his careful movements, drawing laughs from other students. Blake felt his face grow hot with what he initially thought was solidarity with his friends, but increasingly recognized as shame when his cafeteria shift ended. Blake changed out of the hairnet and apron, heading to the library for his free period. Passing the main office, he overheard Principal Marquez on the phone, her voice firm but tired. "Yes, Superintendent, I understand the concerns, but the Dignity for All initiative is already showing positive results. I'd be happy to present the data at the board meeting." Blake lingered by the partially open door. "With all due respect, sister, the donation from the Thompson family doesn't entitle them to dictate school policy. All students deserve—" She paused, apparently interrupted. "I understand, yes. I'll be there Monday evening." Something about her tone made Blake uncomfortable. Adults usually gave in when his father applied pressure. Principal Marquez sounded worried, but resolute, a combination he wasn't used to hearing from authority figures interacting with the Thompson name. In the library, Blake found himself wandering to a computer furthest from the librarian's desk. On impulse, he typed "Poverty Children United States" into the search bar. The statistics surprised him. Over 10 million children living in poverty, many without consistent access to food-secure housing or health care. He clicked through several articles, learning about food insecurity, weekend hunger, and the challenges faced by students whose only reliable meals came from school. Researching for social studies? Blake startled, looking up to find the librarian, Mrs. Hernandez, standing beside him. He quickly moved to close the browser. "It's okay," she said gently. "That's what the computers are for, learning." "It's nothing," Blake mumbled, embarrassed to be caught. Mrs. Hernandez glanced at the screen. Not nothing. Important information many people don't realize. Did you know we have a weekend backpack program here, started last month? Provides food for students who might not have enough at home. Blake thought about the kitchen at his house with its double refrigerator, always stocked with organic produce, imported cheeses, and premium snacks. The pantry continually replenished by their housekeeper without him ever having to think about where food came from or what it cost. I didn't know, he admitted. Principal Marquez started it. 37 students currently receive backpacks. All confidential, of course. Blake wondered if Noah Jenkins was one of those 37. The thought of the thin boy going home to an empty refrigerator made his stomach tighten uncomfortably. After school, Blake found himself walking home rather than waiting for his mother's Range Rover as usual. He needed to think, and the crisp autumn air helped clear his head. Passing the community park, he spotted a familiar figure sitting alone on a bench, a book open on his lap. Noah Jenkins, reading intently, hadn't noticed Blake's approach. Up close, Blake could see the book was advanced far beyond second grade level, some kind of science text with complicated diagrams. Blake hesitated, then made a decision that surprised even himself. "Hey," he said, stopping a few feet from the bench. Noah looked up, his body instantly tensing, his expression guarded. "Hi." An awkward silence followed, neither boy sure how to navigate this unexpected interaction. "What are you reading?" Blake finally asked. Noah turned the book so Blake could see the cover. "Astronomy. It's about stars and planets and stuff." "That looks hard," Noah shrugged. "Not really. It's interesting. My mom used to..." He stopped, looking away. Blake remembered hearing Noah's mother had died. Another uncomfortable feeling settled in his chest. "Your mom liked stars?" Noah nodded. "She was going to be a scientist before she got sick. She taught me about constellations. We used to look at them together." Blake had never lost anyone close to him. His grandparents were still alive, healthy, and wealthy, living in a retirement community in Florida. He couldn't imagine what it would be like to lose his mother, despite how annoyed he sometimes felt with her constant questions and concerns. "That's cool," he said inadequately. "That she taught you stuff." Another silence fell. Blake shifted his expensive sneakers against the pavement. "I'm sorry," he said, finally the words feeling foreign on his tongue. "About your lunch that day and other stuff before." Noah looked at him with surprise, clearly assessing Blake's sincerity. "Okay," he said simply. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, but it was acceptance of the apology. Blake nodded awkwardly, then continued his walk home, thinking about stars' mothers who taught science and refrigerators that might be empty. When he arrived home, he found his parents in the midst of an argument, something rare enough to stop him in the doorway. "This vendetta against Principal Marquez has gone far enough, Richard," his mother was saying, her voice stronger than Blake had ever heard it. "She's trying to help children in need. She's pushing a political agenda, Charlotte, and using our son as an example. She's holding our son accountable. There's a difference." Blake retreated quietly to the staircase, not wanting to be noticed, but unable to stop listening. "Blake needs to understand there are consequences for his actions," his mother continued, "just like you and I have consequences for ours. What are we teaching him when we try to bulldoze anyone who challenges him? We're teaching him to be a Thompson, to fight for his position. No, Richard, we're teaching him to be a bully, just like his father." The Westridge Elementary School Board meeting was scheduled for 7 p.m. in the library, a space usually filled with the whispered explorations of children, now transformed into a battleground for adults. By 6:30, the room was already at capacity. Parents, teachers, and community members filling every available chair, with latecomers lining the walls. Elena Marquez sat at the front table alongside Superintendent Davis and the 5 school board members, reviewing her notes one final time. The agenda item that had drawn the unprecedented crowd was listed innocuously as "Review of New Student Support Initiatives." but everyone knew what was really at stake. Richard Thompson had arrived early, claiming a front-row seat, his expression confident, bordering on smug. He had spent the weekend rallying support among fellow wealthy parents, many of whom sat nearby like a well-dressed army. Elena noticed with interest that Charlotte Thompson chose a seat several rows back, separate from her husband. At precisely 7:00 board, President Margaret Williams called the meeting to order. After dispensing with routine matters, she turned to the main event. We'll now address Agenda Item 5, review of Principal Marquez's Dignity for All initiative. Superintendent Davis, would you like to introduce this topic? Davis, a political creature who had survived 3 decades in educational administration by carefully balancing competing interests, cleared his throat. Thank you, President Williams. As the board is aware, Principal Marquez recently implemented a new program at Westridge Elementary focused on addressing socioeconomic disparities among students. While well-intentioned, this program has raised concerns among some parents about resource allocation, school culture, and disciplinary procedures. Elena noted his careful framing, avoiding direct criticism, while clearly signaling his alignment with the Thompson faction. Politics, as usual. Principal Marquez, would you like to present your program before we open for public comment? Elena stood approaching the podium with calm confidence. Thank you. The Dignity for All initiative addresses a reality we've long ignored at Westridge. Not all our students come from the same economic background. Approximately 12% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch. Several live in transitional housing or face food insecurity at home. These challenges impact their academic performance, social development, and sense of belonging. She outlined the program's 3 components: the educational curriculum, the Dignity Closet, and the revised anti-bullying policy, explaining how each element was research-based and aligned with district goals. In just 3 weeks, we've seen positive results. Disciplinary incidents are down 22%. Participation in class discussions has increased among previously disengaged students. And perhaps most importantly, we're seeing spontaneous acts of empathy and inclusion from students who previously exhibited bullying behaviors. As Elena returned to her seat, Richard Thompson leaned forward, whispering intensely to those around him. The public comment period began with James Foster, Richard's ally, taking the microphone first. While Principal Marquez's intentions may be admirable, he began his rehearsed speech, many parents are concerned that Westridge is shifting focus from academic excellence to social services. We chose this school for its educational rigor, not its welfare programs. Several parents nodded in agreement. Elena remained expressionless, though the characterization stung. 3 more speakers echoed similar sentiments, each carefully avoiding directly opposing help for poor children, while suggesting such initiatives belonged elsewhere, not at their prestigious school. Then Charlotte Thompson approached the microphone, creating a ripple of whispers. My name is Charlotte Thompson. My son Blake is a 3rd grader at Westridge, and yes, my husband and I have been significant donors to the school. She paused, gathering herself. I initially had reservations about Principal Marquez's program, and especially about my son's punishment for bullying another student. Richard Thompson shifted uncomfortably in his seat, clearly not having anticipated his wife's public comments, but I've had the opportunity to meet Noah Jenkins, the boy my son bullied. I've visited his home, spoken with his father, and learned about their struggles following his mother's death from cancer. What I discovered was a family working incredibly hard to survive in circumstances most of us cannot imagine. The room had gone completely silent. The Dignity for All initiative isn't taking anything away from our children. It's giving them something invaluable, the opportunity to develop empathy, to understand privilege, and to learn that a community cares for all its members, not just those with financial advantages. Elena felt a surge of hope as several parents nodded, including some she had expected to oppose the program. Charlotte wasn't finished. My own son has shown remarkable growth these past weeks. His participation in cafeteria duty, which I initially opposed, has opened his eyes to realities he never knew existed. As parents, isn't that what we want? Children who excel academically, but also develop moral character and social responsibility? As Charlotte returned to her seat, Richard stared straight ahead, his jaw clenched. The next speaker approached the microphone, a man Elena didn't recognize, wearing worn work clothes and looking distinctly uncomfortable in the formal setting. "My name is David Jenkins. I'm Noah's father." His voice wavered slightly but strengthened as he continued. "A month ago I was at rock bottom. My wife gone, my job gone, drowning my grief in alcohol while my son went hungry. I was failing as a father and saw no way forward." David's raw honesty held the room captive. Principal Marquez visited our apartment. She could have reported me. To Child Services had every right to. Instead, she connected me with resources I didn't know existed. Because of her, I'm 30 days sober today. He touched a small chip on his lapel. I've found temporary work and have 3 interviews next week for permanent positions. My son has food on the weekends, clean clothes that fit, and most importantly, hope. He looked directly at Richard Thompson. "I understand some people think helping families like mine isn't the school's job. Maybe they're right. But I can tell you this, when a community lifts up its most vulnerable members, everyone benefits. My son is thriving academically now that his basic needs are met. Isn't that what schools are supposed to do? Help children learn and grow?" By the time public comments concluded, 17 people had spoken. 11 in favor of the initiative, including teachers, a pediatrician, and, surprisingly, the owner of a local business who offered to fund the weekend backpack program for a year, and 6 against, led by Richard and his closest allies. Board President Williams called for a brief recess before the vote. Elena stepped into the hallway for a moment of quiet, noticing a small figure partially hidden behind a bookshelf. "Blake, what are you doing here?" The boy emerged looking uncomfortable in his school uniform, clearly brought along by one or both parents. "My dad wanted me to come, said it was important to see how things work." Elena nodded. "And what do you think about what you've heard?" Blake considered the question with surprising seriousness. "My mom was right about Noah, and his dad seems really nice, just sad." He hesitated. "I didn't know about the weekend backpacks, that people don't have food at home sometimes. There's a lot we don't see in others' lives unless we look carefully," Elena offered. Blake nodded. "Am I still a bully? If I feel bad about what I did?" The question caught Elena by surprise with its vulnerability. Feeling bad about hurting someone is the first step to changing Blake. What matters now is what you choose to do going forward. The boy seemed to consider this before returning to where his mother sat, watching their interaction with a thoughtful expression. When the board reconvened, President Williams called for the vote. On the motion to continue the Dignity for All initiative, as implemented by Principal Marquez, all those in favor, 4 hands rose, including Williams' own. Opposed? 1 hand, Franklin Peters, Richard's longtime golf partner. Elena released the breath she'd been holding. The Dignity for All initiative would continue despite Richard Thompson's opposition. More importantly, the community conversation it had sparked might finally begin to bridge the divide that had separated Westridge families for too long. The announcement of Westridge Elementary's first Community Connection fundraiser came in late October, colorful flyers sent home with each student and emails distributed to the parent list. Unlike traditional school fundraisers focused on athletic, facilities, or technology upgrades, this event would support the Dignity for All initiative, providing sustainable funding for the weekend backpack program, Dignity Closet, and counseling services. Elena Marquez had designed the event carefully to bridge the socioeconomic divide rather than highlight it. Instead of an expensive gala that would exclude less affluent families, she planned a Saturday fall festival with activities priced to allow participation from everyone. carnival games, bake sale, craft stations, and a student art exhibition with proceeds from art sales going directly to the Dignity Fund. "I love this," Charlotte Thompson told Elena during a planning meeting. "Especially the student art showcase. It gives every child a chance to contribute regardless of their family's resources." Charlotte had surprised everyone by volunteering to chair the fundraising committee, recruiting a diverse team that included parents from across the economic spectrum. Her involvement had legitimized the event among Westridge's wealthy families, many of whom followed her lead in offering support despite Richard Thompson's continued opposition. Noah Jenkins had initially shown little interest in the festival. Large school events typically emphasized his outsider status, the activities and opportunities clearly designed with wealthy families in mind. But when Mrs. Collins announced the art showcase component, his interest peaked. "Each student is invited to submit artwork for display and potential sale," she explained. "You can create anything: paintings, drawings, sculptures, photography. Visitors will make donations for pieces they wish to take home with all proceeds." Supporting our school community. Noah had inherited his mother's scientific mind, but also her artistic talent. In the evenings after homework was complete, he often sketched constellations and nebulae on whatever paper he could find. Now he had a purpose for this private passion. "I'm doing a space painting for the art show," he told his father that evening. "Mrs. Collins says I can use the art room supplies after school." David watched his son's face illuminate with excitement, a sight becoming more common as their lives slowly stabilized. He had secured the maintenance position at the community college, providing steady income benefits and hours compatible with Noah's school schedule. 35 days sober, he attended meetings regularly, sometimes bringing Noah to the family support programs, where the boy was finally processing his grief among peers who understood. "That sounds great, buddy. I can pick you up later on the days you stay to work on it." Noah's project took shape over the following week, a series of watercolor paintings depicting the night sky from different global perspectives. Mrs. Welch, the art teacher, provided guidance and materials, impressed by Noah's vision and attention to scientific detail. "These are remarkable, Noah," she told him, studying the constellation paintings. "You've captured not just the aesthetic beauty, but the astronomical accuracy." Noah beamed under the praise. "My mom taught me that the same stars look different depending on where you are on Earth. These show the night sky from different continents." As the festival approached, Westridge buzzed with preparation. The parent committee transformed the school, grounds with autumn decorations, craft stations, and game booths. Student artwork was professionally displayed in the gymnasium, each piece accompanied by an artist statement and suggested donation amount. Noah arrived early on festival day, accompanying his father, who had volunteered for setup crew. David Jenkins, now a familiar face among the parent volunteers, worked alongside others, erecting tents and arranging tables, his sobriety chip visible on the lanyard holding his volunteer badge. Blake spotted Noah near the art display area and hurried over. Their solar system project, completed with an A+ grade, had solidified an unexpected friendship. Blake had even started joining Noah in the library during lunch, their conversations evolving from astronomy to shared interests in video games, comics, and sports. "Are your paintings here already?" Blake asked, excitement evident in his voice. "My mom says the art show is going to be awesome." Noah nodded, leading Blake to where his constellation series was displayed. 5 paintings arranged in sequence, each showing the night sky as viewed from a different continent, all scientifically accurate but rendered with emotional depth that communicated Noah's connection to the stars. Blake stared at the paintings clearly. "Impressed?" "These are amazing, like professional museum quality." "Thanks," Noah replied, ducking his head at the praise. "I use the techniques my mom taught me. They're going to sell fast, probably for lots of money." Noah hadn't considered the monetary aspect. "I just wanted to show people how the stars connect us all, even when we see them differently. As visitors began arriving, Noah retreated to help. At a game booth, where David was stationed while Blake joined Charlotte at the welcome table. From her position near the entrance, Helena Marquez watched with satisfaction as Westridge families of all backgrounds mingled, sharing food, games, and conversation in ways they never had before. By mid-afternoon, the festival was in full swing, exceeding expectations for both attendance and fundraising. The art show proved especially popular, with visitors placing donation slips beside student pieces they wished to purchase. Noah's Constellation series attracted significant attention, particularly from Mrs. Peterson, the high school astronomy teacher, who studied the paintings with evident appreciation. Around 3 o'clock, a murmur spread through the crowd as Richard Thompson made an unexpected appearance. He had publicly boycotted the event, encouraging his closest allies to do the same. Now he walked alone through the festival grounds, his expression unreadable as he observed the activities. Charlotte approached him, tension evident in her posture. "Richard, I didn't expect you to come." "Clearly," he replied, his tone clipped. "The board meeting wasn't enough. You had to organize this spectacle. It's a community event supporting children in need. That shouldn't be controversial." Richard surveyed the festival, the mingling of families from mansion and apartment alike. "You've changed, Charlotte. I barely recognize you anymore." "Perhaps I've remembered who I was before," she replied. "Before the money, before the country club, before we started measuring people's worth by their bank accounts." Their conversation was interrupted by Blake running up, excitement coloring his features. "Mom, Noah's paintings sold, all 5 of them. Mrs. Peterson from the high school bought the whole series for the science department." Charlotte smiled, genuinely pleased. "That's wonderful, Blake. Dad, you should see them. They're amazing. Noah knows everything about stars and constellations," and Blake finally registered his father's cold expression and faltered. Richard studied his son, noting the animation in his face, the admiration in his voice when speaking of Noah Jenkins. Something shifted in his expression, not quite softening, but recalibrating. "Show me," he said simply. Blake led his parents to the art display where Noah's paintings were now marked with sold tags. David and Noah stood nearby, clearly celebrating the unexpected success. "Noah," Blake called, "this is my dad. He wanted to see your paintings." Noah looked up, apprehension crossing his features as he recognized Richard Thompson, the man whose opposition to Principal Marquez's initiative was well known throughout the school community. David Jenkins straightened protectively, beside his son, extending his hand. "Mr. Thompson, I'm David Jenkins, Noah's father." Richard hesitated, then shook the offered hand, studying the paintings with a businessman's assessing eye. "These show considerable talent," he acknowledged. "You have a good eye for composition and detail." "Thank you, sir," Noah replied quietly. "My mom taught me." Something in this simple statement seemed to reach Richard. He regarded Noah more carefully, noting the same intelligence he valued in his own son, the potential that transcended circumstance. "Blake tells me you're interested in astronomy. Professionally, I mean." Noah nodded. "I want to work at an observatory someday, study distant galaxies." Richard Thompson nodded thoughtfully. For the first time, he was seeing Noah Jenkins not as a charity case or a political symbol, but as a child with dreams not unlike the ambitions he harbored for Blake.